For over 300 years, no freeborn man in the village dared marry a woman from her people. The elders claimed it was a death sentence. They said the spirits would destroy his home. They said his children would suffer. They said his bloodline would never recover. Yet one young man looked at the most beautiful woman in the village and decided she was worth the risk. The day he married her, his own family refused to attend. His friends abandoned him. The entire village waited for disaster. Some expected him to die within months. Others believed the curse would strike the moment they had children. But what happened after that wedding shocked everyone and forced an entire village to question a belief that had survived for centuries. Because the curse everyone feared never came, and what happened instead changed everything. And before this story ends, you'll have to decide for yourself whether the village was protecting its people or living in fear of a lie. For generations, there was one rule in the village that nobody dared to break. People feared hunger. They feared sickness. They feared war. But there was one thing they feared even more: marrying from the families known as the outcasts. The elders said disaster followed anyone who crossed that line. They said the spirits would become angry. They said misfortune would enter the bloodline. They said wealth would disappear. Children would suffer, and the family name would never recover. For centuries, those warnings were enough. No freeborn son dared marry an outcast woman. No freeborn daughter dared marry an outcast man. The rule survived from one generation to another until nobody could remember how it had truly begun. Yet there was something strange about these so-called outcasts. They lived among everyone else. They farmed the same land. They traded in the same market. They fetched water from the same streams. Their children played on the same roads. But when it came to marriage, they were treated as if they belonged to another world. Long ago, their ancestors had been dedicated to the deity of the land. Their duty was to care for the sacred shrine. They cleaned the grounds around it. They maintained the sacred paths. They prepared offerings during festivals. They performed rituals believed to keep peace between the village and the spirits. The entire community depended on their service. Yet the same community rejected them. As years passed, many of these families accepted their fate. Some married among themselves. Others traveled to distant lands where nobody knew their history. There they found husbands and wives who never asked questions. But deep inside, many still wished for the day when they would be accepted as equal members of the community they had served for generations. The strangest part of all was that the outcast families seemed blessed rather than cursed. Their farms produced good harvests. Their businesses prospered. Many of their sons became wealthy traders. Their daughters were known throughout neighboring villages for their beauty. People whispered that the deity rewarded those who served faithfully. Others claimed the riches were proof of hidden spiritual power. Nobody knew the truth, but everyone agreed on one thing: no matter how beautiful their daughters became, no freeborn family would marry them. Then came a young man named Chima. Unlike many others in the village, Chima was not interested in old fears. He respected tradition. He honored his elders. But he also believed that every tradition deserved a reason. And whenever he asked why the outcasts were forbidden from marriage, nobody gave him an answer that satisfied him. Some simply told him it had always been that way. Others warned him not to ask dangerous questions. But questions have a way of growing stronger when they are ignored. One market day changed everything. Among the crowd, Chima noticed a young woman unlike anyone he had ever seen. Her beauty was impossible to ignore. But it was not only her appearance. There was dignity in the way she carried herself, kindness in the way she treated people, and confidence in the way she moved through a world that constantly judged her. Her name was Ada. She came from one of the outcast families. The moment Chima learned her background, he understood the danger. Most young men would have walked away. Instead, he became even more interested. Days turned into weeks. Weeks became months. The more he learned about Ada, the more impossible it became to ignore his feelings. She was intelligent, hardworking, compassionate, everything a man could hope to find in a wife. Yet society expected him to reject her for one reason alone: her ancestry. Word spread quickly. Villages have a way of turning whispers into storms. Soon, everyone knew. The warnings began. Relatives visited his family. Friends tried to convince him to change his mind. Elders reminded him of the ancient rule. People spoke of mysterious disasters that supposed. Old stories resurfaced. Some claimed entire families had been destroyed. Others spoke of strange illnesses and unexplained deaths. No one could provide proof. But fear rarely needs evidence to survive. The pressure became overwhelming. His family begged him to reconsider. They feared shame. They feared rejection. Most of all, they feared the curse. But Chima refused to abandon the woman he loved. For the first time in generations, someone was willing to challenge a belief that had ruled the village for centuries. As the wedding approached, tension filled the community. People waited for signs: a bad harvest, a sickness, an accident, anything that could be interpreted as a warning from the spirits. But nothing happened. The wedding day finally arrived. What should have been a joyful celebration became a lonely event. Many relatives refused to attend. Many friends stayed away. Some villagers watched from a distance. Others secretly hoped disaster would strike before the ceremony ended. But the wedding took place peacefully. No lightning appeared. No mysterious tragedy unfolded. No curse revealed itself. After the marriage, Chima and Ada left the village. They moved to a growing city far away. There, they started a new life together. Still, the village continued waiting. Everyone expected the curse to arrive eventually, perhaps after 1 month, perhaps after 1 year, perhaps after the birth of their first child. People convinced themselves that disaster was only delayed. Months passed. Nothing happened. A year passed. Nothing happened. Then came news that shocked the village. Chima's business was thriving. His family was healthy. His marriage was strong. Soon they welcomed their first child, then another. The children grew healthy and beautiful. Years passed. The expected curse never appeared. Instead, prosperity seemed to follow them. Every report from the city told the same story: success, peace, happiness. The villagers became confused. Some refused to believe the reports. Others searched desperately for hidden signs of suffering. But there were none. The family everyone expected to be destroyed was flourishing. As time passed, more young people began questioning the ancient rule. They looked at Chima's life and saw evidence that contradicted everything they had been taught. A few became brave enough to follow the same path. They, too, married from the outcast families. And once again, disaster failed to appear. Little by little, the old belief began to weaken. Yet even today, it has not disappeared completely. Some families still refuse such marriages. Some traditions survive long after people forget why they started. Fear has a way of living longer than truth. And sometimes the strongest prison is not made of chains. It is made of beliefs passed from one generation to another. The village waited for disaster. The village expected a curse. The village prepared for tragedy. But what arrived instead was something they never expected. A question that challenged centuries of fear. If the curse was real, why didn't it come? And if it never came, how many lives had been shaped by a fear that was never true in the first place? Even today, the answer depends on who you ask. But one thing is certain. One man's decision changed a story that had ruled an entire village for generations.